Before I start, let me tell you what this story contains. By the end of it, you'll hear how I discovered $18,000 of debt under my name before my 20th birthday, how the person responsible was my own mother, and why one decision I made afterward permanently changed our relationship. This isn't about teenage spending. This isn't about bad choices. This is about identity theft, disguised as motherhood. Before we go any further, pause for 1 second. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and how much battery your phone has right now. Because if you've ever trusted someone just because they were family, this story might hit closer than you expect. My name is Rachel Miller. I was 19 years old when I found out my credit was already ruined. It started with a letter, not a dramatic one. No red ink, no threats. Just a plain white envelope from a bank I didn't recognize. I almost threw it away. I was living at home, working part-time, planning to apply for college the following year. I didn't have a credit card. I'd never taken out a loan. I paid cash for everything. My biggest monthly expense was my phone bill. So when I opened the letter and saw the words, "Past due balance," I honestly thought it was a mistake. Then I saw my name, my full legal name. The amount due, $4,237.19. I laughed out loud. There was no way. I called the number listed, expecting them to apologize and correct it. Instead, the woman on the phone asked me to confirm my social security number. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "You've missed 6 payments, ma'am." That was when I checked my credit report for the first time in my life. There wasn't one account. There were 4 credit cards, 4 different banks, all opened under my name. Total debt, $18,000. My credit score looked like I'd spent years being irresponsible. I sat on my bed staring at the screen, my hands shaking so badly I had to set my phone down. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion, then fear. Then one name surfaced in my mind. Slowly, unwillingly. My mom. She had access to my documents. She knew my social security number. She handled family finances. Still, I didn't want to believe it. I walked into the kitchen holding my phone. "Mom," I said, trying to sound calm. "Do you know why there are credit cards under my name?" She froze, just for a second. Then she started crying, not denying, not asking questions. Crying. "I was going to pay them back," she said. "I swear, I just needed time." In that moment, something inside me cracked. Because before I even turned 20, my future had already been sold, and I hadn't agreed to the price. My mother didn't stop crying. She leaned against the kitchen counter, one hand pressed to her chest like she was the one having trouble breathing. Her shoulders shook. Her voice broke in all the right places. The places that usually made people rush to comfort her. "I was desperate," she said. "You know how hard things have been." I stood there holding my phone, the credit report still open. 4 unfamiliar account numbers burned into my memory. I kept waiting for her to say it was a misunderstanding, that there had been a mistake. She didn't. Instead, she explained. She told me how it started with one card. Just one. She said the refrigerator broke. Then the car needed repairs. Then rent was late. She said she didn't want to stress me out while I was so young. "I meant to pay it back before you ever noticed," she said through tears. I swear I did. I asked the question that had been pounding in my head since the call with the bank. "Why didn't you ask me?" She looked at me like the answer was obvious. "Because you would have said no." That was the moment I realized this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. She walked me through each card like she was confessing to borrowing a sweater, not committing identity theft. Groceries, gas, online shopping, a vacation I didn't know she took, minimum payments missed when money got tight. Every sentence ended the same way. I was going to fix it. I sat down at the table because my legs felt weak. "You used my name," I said quietly. "My credit, my future." She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "Don't," I said. Her face changed then, just slightly. The tears slowed. Her voice sharpened. "I'm your mother," she said. "I carried you. I raised you. I would never hurt you on purpose." The words landed heavier than any accusation, because they came with an unspoken demand. "Forgive me. Protect me. Fix this for me." I asked how long she'd been using the cards. She hesitated. "Since you were 17. My stomach dropped. 2 years. 2 years of damage I hadn't even known existed. I asked if my name was on anything else. She shook her head quickly. Too quickly. "No, of course not." I didn't believe her. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to her move around the house, hearing drawers open and close, wondering what else she'd touched that wasn't hers. My phone buzzed with notifications from credit monitoring apps I'd downloaded in a panic. Late fees, collections, warnings. By morning, my fear had turned into something colder. Clarity. I called the banks back one by one. Every conversation followed the same pattern. They confirmed the accounts. They confirmed the charges. They confirmed the missed payments. Then they asked the same question. "Did you open these accounts?" When I said no, their tone changed. "This may be identity fraud," they said carefully. I knew what that meant. So did my mother. When I told her what the banks had said, she stopped me mid-sentence. "No," she said immediately. "You're not reporting anything." I stared at her. "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do," she insisted. "We'll handle this as a family." Family. The word felt different now. "He'll ruin my life," she said. "If you tell them it was me." I felt something twist in my chest. "What about my life?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she cried again. Harder this time. Louder. Like grief. "I'm your mother," she repeated. "You can't do this to me." That was when the weight of it fully settled in. She wasn't sorry she'd done it. She was afraid of consequences. I went back to my room and closed the door. For the first time, I Googled something I never thought I'd need to know: how to report identity theft by a parent. The results made my hands shake. Police reports, fraud affidavits, investigations. None of it felt real. None of it felt like something a daughter should have to do. But as I stared at my ruined credit score, at the future closing in around me before it had even started, one truth became impossible to ignore. If I didn't act, I would be paying for her choices for the next decade. And she was counting on that. The damage didn't feel real at first. It didn't look like disaster. There was no explosion, no dramatic moment where everything collapsed at once. It was quieter than that. A series of closed doors I didn't understand until it was too late. The first one came when I tried to get my own phone plan. I walked into the store with my ID and a sense of relief, ready to take one small step toward independence. The employee typed for a moment, frowned, then looked up at me. "I'm sorry," she said. "We can't approve you." I laughed, embarrassed. "I don't have bad credit. I don't even have credit." She turned the screen slightly so I could see it. I did. I walked out without a phone and sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. The next door closed when I applied for a student credit card, the kind they advertise to teenagers with no history. The rejection email arrived within seconds. "Based on your credit profile." I didn't finish reading it. I started checking my credit report every morning like it was a medical diagnosis that might change overnight. It didn't. The numbers stayed low. The missed payments stayed. The balances stayed. I started thinking smaller. Maybe I didn't need my own place yet. Maybe I could wait. Maybe I could just work more hours and help my mom pay the cards down faster. That's what she suggested. "We'll tackle it together," she said one night. "You live here anyway." Together meant my paycheck. Together meant her not changing anything. I started handing her money every month. Not for rent, for her debt under my name. I told myself it was temporary, that I was protecting us both. But every payment barely touched the balance. Interest kept growing, late fees stacked, new collection notices arrived. One afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a man on the other end asked to confirm my identity. Then he said, "This is a call regarding a delinquent account." I was 19 years old and being spoken to like a repeat offender. I hung up shaking. That night, I looked at apartments online, just out of curiosity. Every listing I clicked asked the same question. Credit check required. I closed my laptop. College applications came next. One school offered me conditional acceptance, pending proof of financial responsibility. I didn't know how to explain that my credit had been destroyed before I was legally old enough to rent a car. I didn't submit the documents. I didn't tell my mom. I just quietly let the opportunity go. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the constant feeling of being trapped inside a future I hadn't chosen. Every plan came with an invisible wall. Every step forward required permission from a system that thought I was unreliable. And all the while, my mother kept saying the same thing. Just give me time. Time was the one thing I couldn't afford. I started researching late at night. Quietly, carefully, forums, legal advice, stories from people who'd gone through the same thing. That's when I learned the truth. If I didn't file a fraud report, the debt would always be mine. It didn't matter that she was my mother. It didn't matter that she cried. It didn't matter that she promised to fix it. Silence was considered acceptance, and acceptance would cost me years. I stared at my credit report again, scrolling through lines of damage, and felt something inside me harden. I wasn't just losing money, I was losing my 20s. I went into the kitchen the next morning and told her I needed my documents, my birth certificate, my social security card. She looked up sharply. "Why?" "I need them," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you?" I didn't answer, because, for the first time, I understood something clearly. Protecting myself would look like betrayal to her, and I was starting to accept that. I didn't tell my mother what day I planned to do it. I learned quickly that the less she knew, the calmer the house stayed, and the calmer I stayed too. I waited until she left for work, then sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. My documents spread out like evidence from a life I didn't recognize anymore. Birth certificate, social security card, state ID. I stared at them for a long time before I touched the keyboard. Filing an identity theft report sounds simple when you read about it online. In reality, it feels like stepping off a cliff while telling yourself the ground will appear. The form asked questions that felt accusatory even though they weren't. Did you authorize these accounts? Do you know the person who opened them? Are you willing to cooperate with an investigation? Each answer pushed me further down a path I couldn't pretend wasn't real. Yes, I know who did this. No, I didn't consent. Yes, I will cooperate. When it asked for the relationship to the person responsible, my fingers hovered over the keys. Mother, I clicked submit. The confirmation page appeared instantly, cold and final. I sat back in my chair and felt nothing at first. No relief, no panic, just a strange emptiness, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after years of not realizing I was suffocating. The police station was next. I almost turned around in the parking lot. I kept thinking about the phrase she'd used over and over again. "You can't do this to me." But I finally understood the truth hiding underneath it. She meant, "You can't stop protecting me." Inside, the officer was calm, neutral. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look judgmental. He looked experienced. "This happens more than people think," he said after reviewing my report. "Especially with parents." That sentence alone made my eyes burn. I signed the statement, gave copies of everything, answered questions I never thought I'd say out loud. When I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I didn't answer. She called again, then again. By the time I got home, she was waiting in the living room, phone in hand, face tight with something between fear and fury. "What did you do?" she asked. I set my bag down slowly. I reported the fraud. Her face collapsed. "You promised," she said. "You said you'd give me time." "I gave you 2 years," I replied. She started crying again, but this time it sounded different. Sharper. Desperate. "They'll arrest me," she said. "Do you want that on your conscience?" I thought of the collection calls, the rejection emails, the future I'd already started grieving. "I want my life back," I said. She sank onto the couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. "You're ruining this family," she whispered. The words hurt, but they didn't stop me. Over the next few weeks, letters started arriving, this time addressed correctly. Fraud investigation opened, accounts frozen, disputes acknowledged. I learned a new language fast. Case numbers, affidavits, timelines. My mother stopped speaking to me. When she did, it was through guilt, through relatives, through silence. Family members called, asking why I'd gone so far, why I couldn't have handled it privately, why I was making things public. I answered the same way every time. I didn't make it public. I made it legal. The investigation moved forward without drama, without shouting, without emotion. That was the hardest part for her to accept. There was no one left to cry at. One afternoon, an investigator called to confirm details. His tone was professional, but the implication was clear. There would be consequences. I hung up and sat very still. For the first time since I'd opened that first letter, something inside me loosened. Not happiness, freedom. I didn't know how this would end. I didn't know what it would cost our relationship. But I finally understood something I should have known all along. Love that requires silence isn't love. It's control, and I had chosen to let the truth speak instead. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces, phone calls that stopped, invitations that never came, conversations that ended the moment I entered the room. The family didn't explode. It fractured. Quietly, my mother told her version first. She said I'd misunderstood, that I was confused about how credit worked, that she'd only borrowed my name and I'd panicked. By the time relatives reached out to me, the story was already framed. "You know she didn't mean it," one aunt said gently. "She sacrificed everything for you." Another reminded me, "You could have handled this differently." A cousin whispered, "Handled it differently," as if identity theft had a softer version, as if there were a polite way to lose your future. I stopped explaining, because the people who wanted to understand already did. My mother stopped speaking to me directly. Instead, she sent messages through others, warnings disguised as concern. "She's not sleeping. She's sick with worry. She doesn't recognize you anymore." I read every message and felt the same heavy pull toward guilt. But guilt couldn't erase the damage. The investigation moved forward anyway. The banks requested additional documentation. I sent it. They contacted her. She denied everything at first. Then she changed her story. She said she'd thought I'd agreed. She said she was under pressure. She said she was embarrassed. None of it mattered, because the paper trail didn't change. Eventually, the accounts were officially marked as fraudulent. Watching that word appear next to my name felt surreal. Fraud, consumer not responsible. It didn't erase the past, but it stopped it from growing. My credit score didn't bounce back overnight. It crept, slowly, month by month. But for the first time, it was moving in the right direction. The hardest conversation came unexpectedly. One night, my mother knocked on my bedroom door. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. Her confidence stripped away by something she couldn't argue with. "I never thought you'd choose them over me," she said. "I didn't choose them," I replied. "I chose me." She shook her head. "After everything I've done for you," I didn't respond. "Because love isn't a transaction." She waited for an apology I wasn't going to give. When it didn't come, she left. A week later, she moved out to stay with a relative. The house felt empty. Not peaceful, but quiet enough to hear myself think. I realized then that something else had changed. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Not her anger, not her tears, not her disappointment. I had seen what she was willing to do to protect herself, and I had chosen not to carry that for her. Months passed. I was approved for my own phone plan, then a secured credit card, then, finally, an apartment. The day I signed the lease, I sat in my car and cried. Not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. No hidden debts, no borrowed names, no secrets. My mother still tells people I abandoned her. I let her because I know the truth. I didn't abandon her. I stopped letting her abandon me first. And that choice, the one she begged me not to make, was the first adult decision I ever truly made. It took almost a year for my credit to look like it belonged to someone my age again. Not perfect, not clean, but honest. Every month, I watched the number inch upward. I paid the secured card on time. I kept my balances low. I learned things most 19-year-olds never have to think about: utilization ratios, dispute letters, patience. Rebuilding wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, consistent, lonely sometimes, but it was mine. The first apartment I rented wasn't big. The walls were thin, and the kitchen light flickered if I ran the microwave too long. But the lease had one name on it. My name. I remember sitting on the floor the first night, back against the wall, eating takeout from the container because I didn't own a table yet. My phone was plugged in, charging, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a call from a bank, a collector, or my mother. No one could take anything from me in my sleep. That feeling was worth everything. My relationship with my mom never went back to what it was. She reached out once, months later, with a long message about forgiveness and family and how we should put the past behind us. She didn't apologize. She didn't acknowledge what she'd done. She just wanted access again. I didn't respond. That was the boundary. People think boundaries are loud, confrontations, speeches, ultimatums. They're not. Sometimes they're just silence where guilt used to live. I still hear through relatives that she tells the story her way, that she says I chose money over her, that I was ungrateful, cold, disloyal. I don't correct it, because the truth doesn't need my energy anymore. I got into college the following year, not the one I originally dreamed of, but one that worked. I paid my own tuition. I worked nights. I learned how to ask for help without giving away control. And slowly, something unexpected happened. I stopped feeling ashamed, not of the debt, not of the report, not of choosing myself. I realized the shame was never mine to carry. If you're listening to this and you're stuck between protecting your future and protecting someone who hurt you, especially a parent, hear this clearly. You are not cruel for refusing to be collateral damage. You are not ungrateful for telling the truth. And you are not wrong for choosing a future someone else was willing to sacrifice. My mom gave me life, but I had to protect it myself. And if I could go back and talk to the girl who opened that first letter, the one who laughed because she thought it had to be a mistake, I'd tell her this: you're not overreacting. You're not selfish. You're just waking up. Before you leave, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And how much battery does your phone have right now? Because stories like this aren't just about debt. They're about what it costs to stay silent, and what it gives you when you finally stop. There's one thing no one tells you when a parent crosses a line like that. They warn you about the money. They warn you about the paperwork. They warn you about the fallout. What they don't warn you about is the grief. Not the grief of losing a parent, but the grief of realizing the parent you trusted never existed the way you thought. For a long time, I replayed every moment in my head, looking for the version where this didn't happen, the version where she asked instead of taking, where she protected me instead of using me, where love didn't come with a price tag. That version never showed up, and accepting that was harder than filing any report. But here's what surprised me. Once I stopped trying to rewrite the past, the future got lighter. I stopped flinching when my phone rang. I stopped feeling guilty for checking my credit score. I stopped apologizing for being careful. Caution became confidence. Independence became peace. Sometimes people ask if I'd make the same decision again, knowing it cost me a relationship with my mother. My answer is always the same. I didn't lose a relationship. I lost an illusion. and in exchange, I gain my life. If you're listening to this and you've discovered debt that isn't yours, if someone you love is asking you to stay quiet so they don't face consequences, if you're being told that protecting yourself is betrayal, remember this. Love that requires you to destroy your future is not love, and family doesn't mean you owe someone your identity. You're allowed to protect your name. You're allowed to tell the truth. You're allowed to choose yourself, even when it's painful, because one day, you'll look back and realize something important. The moment you stopped carrying their secret was the moment your life finally became yours. And that's not selfish. That's survival.